Hi everybody, Bobby Ogilvy, Project Manager and Professional Coach. Today's question, how should I run my team meetings? So there's a bunch of different approaches here, but I'll start with some of the more common ones from some other places. So some of you, hopefully a lot of you people have heard of Agile, and that uses some methods called Scrum or Standups. So I'll just talk about those for a second. The way you run a Scrum meeting is really just you have everyone there in the team, and what they're supposed to be giving is a 1 minute or less. In fact, a lot of places will cap it at 1 minute. They'll have a little timed meter, and so it'll ding or whatever when their time is up. And the whole point of that meeting that you hopefully have on a daily basis or a very frequent basis, maybe it's a multiple times per week, is that they're answering three questions. What have you done since our last meeting? So like update me on your progress. What are you working on now? What's your current focus of work, and what are the roadblocks in your way? And I'll go through why these are important. So the first part is the update, and that's probably the most typical thing we think of when we're dealing with meetings in big teams. Everyone wants to know what everyone else is doing and that they're all working on the right things. And so it's important to get a sense of, okay, so how far are we with that thing you were working on? Great, update me in your progress. Good. Then that naturally leads to the second question of, okay, so you worked on that thing. What are you working on now? Right? What's your current focus? This is really important in a team too, where there's like a shared load of work. So if you think of even like a sales team, right? You might have a whole bunch of people in your list you're trying to qualify as leads, right? Okay, well, this person handles that chunk, that person handles that chunk. So you can see how, as much as this is supposed to be individual to individual and you've already divided up tasks, if you want, you could have, that question could be part of it. Like, which tasks are you working on next? Of this bucket of tasks, what's your current focus? What's your priority? Or that could even be kind of a management decision to say, well, listen, this is the thing we've decided is priority, so forget this other thing we thought you'd be working on, work on this thing. This is what really makes sense. And the last question about what's in your way is important in ensuring future progress. And so, I mean, there's both kind of a management tone of like, how can I help you overcome that? But also kind of a self-awareness and learning check-in for them to say, like, do you know how to handle this? Think of that. I mean, there's probably all been times to varying degrees when we've dealt with someone or certainly seen someone who's out of their depth in terms of being able to accomplish a task, right? And hopefully they're aware of that and they can either not admit to that, not commit to that, right? They don't want to take on the task because they know they can't do it. But we've probably also seen people too who maybe aren't so self-aware of the fact that they're not doing well, or could be from a performance and an optics standpoint, they don't want to admit it, right? There could be some other compensation or some other ramifications if they were to show they couldn't do it, and so they're trying to do it, but they're not able to do it. So from a management perspective, it's really good to know that. You've probably heard me in some other videos talk about transformational leadership, and some of the important attitudes in that are really that you're trying to transform people, you're trying to train them and cultivate more skills, more capacity within them over time, because they are your useful assets, which allow you to scale and grow your organization and scale more operations and delegate tasks to them. And so in that sense, this third question about barriers is kind of a learning question, right? Are you learning enough that you can do this? Anyway, so that's one way to approach team meetings. What are some other important things? Generally, an agenda is nice. It doesn't need to be big and formal, and I certainly don't recommend Robert's Rule of Order. I mean, so just to give you a sense of that culture that's born out of is big, large, democratic type meetings, which are, I would say, 12 plus people. So I'm thinking, student unions have to do it. Lots of nonprofits, they do it. Many boards will operate this way, a bit more formal when they need to make a decision on something. But you wouldn't want to run, an 8-10 person 5-person team meeting that way. No, that's not the best way to proceed. The whole point of that was to almost regulate all the potential things that in a 50, 100, or maybe 500. I think 500 is probably too big, but some large type group, moderate them in terms of how they're speaking and interacting. But you don't want that. But some agenda point of what you're dealing with, what you point needs to talk about, those are good. Another thing I find can work well is some kind of handout or reference point. And just a bit about the facilitation of the framing around this is you can almost frame this like, well, this is a draft. I want to talk about this thing, right? If you think about the nature of having subject matter experts, right? So the good thing is when you start to throw groups in there, the quality control, essentially, the kind of 360 view, the editing, the kind of thorough look at stuff gets quite a bit better, but there can still be subject matter experts, right? So if you think of, even if it was the expert who was leading some document that you were making, right, or something you guys wanted to review or edit. Your expert could make it, and then the other dozen people in the team get to look at it and say, what do we change about this, right? What do we need to adjust, or what do we add in, or anyway, what do we modify about that? That's a good way to approach it. And so in that sense, framing it as a draft is trying to get feedback from people about something you already have. The good thing about that overall approach too is that it's showing them something and improving it, as opposed to, I think one thing I would steer away from is a total lack of structure into things. In some of the more meditation and spiritual circles I run in, they're very big on not having agendas, and you could always frame it as like a client-centered way of approaching meetings, and that can have advantages in terms of culture, right? So you could see how lots of nonprofits would gravitate towards that, because as much as they may want to execute, the real focus is on embodying the values of that organization, right? So it has a tone of maybe authentic or servant leadership, right? But I actually don't recommend that, in that you tend to get better feedback if you can put some ideas, some options forward, and then leave the carte blanche to say, and we could modify these, or it could be something else. When you don't put any ideas forward, it can almost be so unstructured that you don't have enough progress to succeed. There's some research a couple of years ago I was looking into that dealt with different types of shared versus formal leadership, and what it was essentially saying was that in the start, or early on, or particularly in distance or distributed virtual teams, formal leadership was better because it helped add enough crunch and structure to get progress, to get things going, or you could frame it as to have enough of a task orientation that team was effective, right? And then over time then, as they internalize some of that, as the culture becomes better and you can see what's fitting, you can go to more shared leadership, right? You can, be less rigid about how you're running and managing things. And you could see how that even kind of has tones with Tuckman's kind of forming, storming, norming model of, like, at first you're forming and it's really all task orientation and people just learning how to do the tasks, right? And then it can shift to more people oriented as those team bonds start to form and as you have experience operating and doing the tasks. Okay, so just to recap, what are some good ways to run team meetings? A Scrum or a stand-up is great, particularly for recurring team meetings. You just want brief updates. And again, those three questions are, what were you working on? What progress have you made? What are you working on now? What's your current focus? And what barriers are in your way that you need help with? Another point would be have an agenda point or a few points of the main priorities you're trying to focus on. And another thing would be to say, show drafts, show options of the documents or whatever things that you're working on, and frame it as about getting feedback. Here are some potential ideas that we're looking at, and then get feedback from them. As opposed to, I don't recommend going in with totally no structure, totally no agenda, totally no focus of your meeting. Those will not be productive meetings, and they will actually piss your team off. Just a cautionary point here. Remember, when you're at a meeting, you're simultaneously using everyone's time. So if you have 10 people in a meeting that's 1 hour long, you didn't use 1 hour, you actually burnt 10 man hours. So please use your meeting time sparingly and effectively. Your team will thank you for it. I'm Bobby Ogilvy, Project Manager and Professional Coach.